Well, 2025 is almost complete. You're listening to UWS Radio. I'm Laurie Finlayson, and it's time for the year in review in sport. And we've got plenty of contributors over the next 30 minutes or so. And first, we're going to go to our Scottish football correspondent, Kevin Kennedy, for just a little bit of chat around what's been a very interesting year in Scottish football. And we're going to start with the Scottish Cup winners, Aberdeen. And of course, we had Europe there in the final countdown. They got themselves into Europe after a Scottish Cup win. I mean, that was a brilliant achievement for Aberdeen, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely a brilliant achievement for Aberdeen. I think when you look at what they've done the past few years, bringing Jimmy Tolina was a massive coup, and that certainly led them to win the Scottish Cup. Because when you look at their season as well, obviously they started the season well. I think after something like 6 games, they were top of the league, kind of fighting with Celtic for the league, and they've managed to get themselves that cup, which got them into Europe. And it means a lot for the fans as well, because you see what they done with the open top bus parade. That was some day for the Aberdeen fans.
Yes, it really was. And good friend of the station, David McGilvery, I'm sure, will have some memories of that one. But do you think the Scottish Cup win has actually bought Jimmy Tolina some time and some credit? Because they've had a tough start to the season, haven't they?
Yeah, it's definitely been a tough start to the season. To be honest, I think, like you said, if Aberdeen don't win the Scottish Cup, I don't think Jimmy Tolina's in the job right now. I think it has kind of gave him the time with the Aberdeen board. Whether it's given him the time with the Aberdeen fans is another question though.
Yeah, that is totally another question. Aberdeen have really stuttered along this season, and even Europe hasn't been saving them either. I mean, we're not going to go into the Greek tragedy in recent weeks, but of course, in the Premiership, Aberdeen sitting ninth on just 10 points, and they're only a point better off than second bottom Dundee. You would have put Jimmy Tolina well ahead of Stephen Presley, wouldn't you, before the ball was kicked?
Definitely, yeah, because he definitely got the experience of the Scottish game over Stephen Presley, and I think to some, Aberdeen's position might be a false position right now, because I think once they're out of Europe, then they can focus on the league, and then we'll see results start to turn for Aberdeen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about potential false positions. I don't know whether this next one is a false position or actually a true position. We'll find out. Rangers have had a very interesting 2025, from having Barry Ferguson in charge alongside a team of pundits towards the end of last season, to having the appointment of Russell Martin and a takeover from the 49ers as well. It's been a pretty turbulent time to watch Rangers, hasn't it?
Well, if you're a Rangers fan, it's a torrid time right now. When you look at how the fans reacted to Russell Martin, to be honest, in my opinion, I think he was very, very harshly treated. I think he should have been given more time, although you know what it's like with Rangers support. If you don't start very well within your first kind of 2-3 months, you don't get a chance to even get your ideas across.
I think, and feel free to discuss on this, Kevin, I feel like a lot of it was down to pretty poor recruitment actually, because to be fair, Rangers of course under new ownership with the 49ers, but I think it's a case of just almost rip it up and start again. It feels like Rangers has been, and it feels like we're going to do that again, which isn't great if you are the Rangers board. Of course, under the stewardship of Danny Rule now, do you think he's going to be the guy that will at least steady the ship?
I think he'll steady the ship for the season, but just to go back to your point on recruitment, I think this just sums it up perfectly for Rangers right now when you look at their back four. I think it's either 3 of the back 4 or all 4 of the back 4 are going to be out of contract come the end of the season, when you include the loans as well.
Yeah, they seem for an old firm side, they seem very reliant on loans. And I was listening to some television coverage recently, whereby a former Rangers striker, of course, Alan McCoy, was kind of questioning whether Rangers have become a development club, and that's something I was thinking about. Rangers or Celtic probably feel they're bigger than main development clubs or stepping stone in that sense for young loan players. I mean, is that a sign that Rangers have regressed?
I don't think so, but when I think back to obviously the 49ers taking over, there was the talk of, obviously because they own Leeds, would Rangers then become a feeder club for Leeds, like bringing through their youth? So in a way I think that's happened, but it's not happened the way Rangers fans thought was going to happen.
Absolutely, that makes complete sense. And of course, we're going to switch over to the east end of Glasgow, where things have taken quite the turn. Of course, the end of last season, yes, they had the Rethwick double, but it wasn't a treble in the end, as the aforementioned Aberdeen. But obviously, the league season and, of course, not getting into the Champions League hadn't been the way Celtic fans would have envisioned. But of course, plenty of pressure on the Celtic board in terms of lack of investment, etc. But of course, in more recent times, and probably the most newsworthy thing, the departure of Brendan Rodgers having resigned. I mean, wow. Both old firm clubs are absolutely going through the ringer at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. But I do think the Brendan Rodgers resigning was a long time coming. I think you could see it from a mile off.
Yeah, the body language. You can tell body language and mood music, definitely. I think it's one of these ones where that needs to just kind of... You can't sweep that under the carpet. Brendan tried for so long, but then you could see certain comments in the media that were being made that he was just getting overly frustrated with certain things. And then obviously, just quickly, the Celtic board and, of course, Dermot Desmond put out a particular statement which, let's just say, Kevin, pulled no punches.
It was very, very scathing, I think, when you look at the statement that was made. That was made, in my opinion, with the intention that Brendan Rodgers should never get another job again.
Yeah, I think that is very much with that intention. And we're going to bring in Kyle Gunn, who's going to talk a bit more positively around Scottish sport. And Kyle, just quickly, you know, it's one of these ones where we have spoken about some negatives in Scottish football, but of course, not even just the football, there have been some sports stars performing well, particularly on the continent. And of course, you can go through some of those because a few people to be proud of this year.
In Giga Kangway, yes, we've got Scott McCommie and Billy Gilmer, who have both won the Serie A with Napoli at their first attempt. So that was the club's fourth Serie A title overall, particularly Scott McCommie. He contributed 14 goals in all competitions at that point in time. But you also look at former Aberdeen midfielder with Ferguson, who captained Bologna to the Coppa Italia success. The success was part of a good season for him, although he had an injury for a wee bit of that. Andy Robertson will hopefully back up his title with Liverpool last year by leading his country at a World Cup, but also in golf this year, Robert McIntyre had become the first Scottish golfer since 2005 to win the Alfred Gunhill Range Championship since Colin Montgomery done so and took home over £600,000 in prize money.
Yeah, that's some achievement. I mean, of course, some brilliant achievements in there, but 600 grand in prize money, that's brilliant. That's in it for you in golf sometimes. Congratulations to him. And of course, some of the footballers that we mentioned, of course, Scott McTominay doing brilliant. Billy Gilmer, of course, hailing from Ardrossan, so not too far from where we are recording here in Ayr. So, just really, really brilliant to see so many, Scottish people just doing their thing abroad as well as just in the world stage. I mean, Rob McIntyre, brilliant as we say, and in terms of footballers, Italy seems to be a second home for Scotland, and I'm actually going to bring in Ethan Barlow here as well, who's a little bit of a Scottish national team correspondent. Kyle mentioned there that potentially Andy Robertson, Scotland captain, could lead his side to the World Cup in America, Canada and Mexico. But here's one thing quickly before we go into the national team itself. Do you think, and this is for us all maybe jump in on, if you like, and Kyle you can as well, it's a case of, is Andy Robertson a different player for Scotland when he's leading them than he is in a Liverpool shirt? To me, he's a bit more forward thinking, but just playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point to make, Laurie, and I think it has been maybe the case for years now when I think Andrew Robertson's broke into the Liverpool team again this season, and obviously he's been a mainstay over the last few years, but I think it is the case. But I think always when you're surrounded with better players, and he has obviously been surrounded by some excellent players at Liverpool, some really good players with Scotland as well, but I think it's natural that he would play better in a team surrounded by world-class players across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And a final point on the Scots abroad. Lewis Ferguson was mentioned by Kyle there. And of course he's someone who's bounced back in 2025 from getting an ACL injury last year. And as you say, leading Bologna to glory. He's someone who maybe hasn't been given too much of a chance in a Scotland shirt, but more recently you've started to see him try and cement a place in that midfield. And the Scotland midfield is really hard to break into because you could probably list off, and we're not going to do it because we can't be here all day, you could probably list off 10 or 15 top quality Scotland midfielders, couldn't you? And I mean, Lewis Ferguson, does Lewis Ferguson actually start for you, would you say? Would you say Lewis Ferguson gets a starting berth these days or not?
I think it's a really difficult one to call because, as you mentioned, there's lots of quality in that area. He's performed well in some of the qualifying games, less so in some of the other ones, but I think you could sort of attribute that to all the Scotland players, especially the performance like Belarus. But yeah, it's a massive couple of fixtures coming up in just over 10 days' time. We'll learn the fate of Scotland, whether they will be automatically heading out to the States, Mexico or Canada as you referenced to, or it will be those two qualifying rounds which Scotland have fell short in the past. On Monday, obviously, Steve Clarke announced his squad for the two fixtures against Greece and Denmark. I think Scott Bain and Lawrence Shanklin were some of the most notable recalls. The former Celtic and now Falkirk goalkeeper partners Craig Gordon and Liam Kelly as the keeper options for Clarke after number one option. Angus Gunn suffered a season-ending cruciate ligament injury. I've got, just to throw it back to you, Laurie, who would you start and who do you think Steve Clarke will start in the goalkeeping position for these two matches?
Ooh, interesting one, Ethan, thank you. I think as to who would start, I reckon Steve Clarke will go with experience with Craig Gordon, although saying that he hasn't played for Hearts this season, although he has started to be named in matchday squads. We all remember at the just before the start of the Euros, he was the guy who we all were saying goodbye to at Hampden when it was Scotland against Finland that night, where everyone was too interested in a Taylor Swift gig to think about what was going on at Hampden. You may remember, but I think as to who will start, to go back to your question, Ethan, if it was me, I'd be controversial and start Scott Bain for one reason. He's the only goalkeeper who's actually playing who's been named in that squad.
Yeah, and you could make the point that Craig Gordon's arguably the third choice goalkeeper at Hearts at the minute, which could be crazy that he's starting these two massive fixtures. Just to open the floor to Kyle and Kevin, do you have any thoughts on the goalkeeping situation?
I would say I know that we're talking about players who haven't played football this season, but I would got we can go into I think you've got to go with these when you're big, when you're coming in to big games.
Yeah, I think experience is a valid point. And Kevin, Craig Gordon is someone who he's almost ageless to people, isn't he? Because like he was someone whose career was almost ended, like I don't know, 10, 15 years ago now with a knee injury, and now here we are coming back from a double leg break in his late 30s, and could he start for Scotland?
He could start for Scotland. He probably will start for Scotland, but in my opinion, he should not start for Scotland. I think it should be someone younger, like a Scott Bain, because when you look at his form right now, he is probably the best Scottish goalkeeper we've got. But when you look at it as a longer term issue, I think goalkeeper is going to be somewhere where Scotland will struggle for a number of years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. There's guys like Callan McKenna, there's Kieran Slicker, who we saw at Hampden, and he didn't go too well in his Scotland debut, of course, the former Manchester City youth. But goalkeeper is somewhere where we might struggle. And that brings on a really interesting point around Scottish football, something which is a bit of news that has broken very recently. The closure of the SFA Performance School programme is coming up. I mean, you could honestly keep the Performance School programme open and just keep it for goalies, couldn't you? I mean, it has produced the likes of Billy Gilmore and Nathan Patterson in the past outfield, but goalkeepers are a little bit of a stumbling point. And Ethan, I mean, when you look at the national team, whenever the SFA announce it, they always have the little badge to tell you the Performance School graduates. Is it a bit of a shame that it's getting shut, or are we looking at things through an Ayrshire lens? Because of course one of those schools is in Ayrshire, it's in Kilmarnock, which is where Billy Gilmore started out.
Yeah, it's certainly disappointing that'll no longer be a route for Scottish players to make the national team. And yeah, I agree with your point. I think goalkeeper is a real struggle area for Scotland at the minute, and another area which some fans might say is a struggle area is the striker position. And Lauren Shankland recalled, as I mentioned, and he's obviously been excellent for Hearts this season, but will he start is the big question, or will Steve Clarke go with his more favourable players like your Shea Adams and Lyndon Dykes? And my question maybe to the floor again is whether you think Lauren Shankland will start any of the two games, and whether you think he should start any of the two games, Laurie.
Okay, so I think Lauren Shankland should, but he won't. I think Steve Clarke lacks trust in Shankland for some reason. Although he is the sort of guy, in these two upcoming games, which are effectively shootouts, if you need a goal, I would trust him to finish. What do you two reckon, Kevin and Kyle?
I reckon he should, but again, what I don't think he will, the Denmark game, that's one of his old game at Hampden, and if we need a goal, I reckon Shankland's the best bet for a goal right now with a start of the season is Haggard Hearts. So yeah, I'll be gone, but I don't think Steve Clarke will.
Okay, well.
To be fair, Laurie, sorry to jump in there, I'm the exact same as Kyle, but it brings into a wider point for me the fact that Steve Clarke is too stubborn. But when you look at it and see if he gets us the World Cup, we'll take it. He's too stubborn, but we'll take it. It's a World Cup and a Euros. 2 Euros he's taking us to, so he's got to go down as one of Scotland's greats for me.
Absolutely, and he has to go down as one of Scotland's greats statistically, as he is now the longest serving national team manager. He recently broke Craig Brown's old record after the game recently against Belarus. Less said about the game the better, as you alluded to earlier in the show. We have a dream, and dreams come true, as the Scotland squad themselves said in the 80s. And yeah, so just going on from that, I think the Scotland team have history to make. Will they make it is a big question. I personally think they will, but let's open to the floor. Are Scotland heading across the Atlantic? Okay.
Yeah, I think that is the question, and it's obviously a massive 2 games, and hopefully Scotland pull it out the bag.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And Kevin, what do you think?
I'm the exact same as Ethan. I think if we get to the World Cup, spot on. And Steve Clark's one of Scotland's greats, as I've said again.
You reckon World Cup in this one song, just quickly?
Yeah, I think you. Yeah.
Yeah, you think we're going to make it, Kyle? Good. Let's be optimistic here. No Scotland, no party, and all that here on UWS Radio. And, you know, like, Steve Clark is not going to be the only thing in 2025 and hasn't been. He's not the only headline story. And it is time to wrap up here on UWS as there's more news coming your way very soon on uwsnewsroom.com. I've been Laurie Finlayson, and we've had some wonderful contributions from Ethan Barlow, Kevin Kennedy and Kyle Gunn. And of course, bye for now.